So we'll do that one real quick, and then we'll get to you guys. I really apologize for keeping you waiting.
If you want to begin, let me know.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, you're good.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board work session for Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. We have a really full agenda for this evening, and we're running a few minutes late, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. The first item on our agenda this evening is we are going to talk about the new state legislation with regard to cannabis. And we have Drew Gamels, who's here from Keen & Bean, the Town Council, to provide the Town Board with an overview of the legislation and the items before the Town Board with regard to regulation of the use and the sale of cannabis. Drew?
Hi, thank you, everyone. So I'll try and be quick, but if I go too fast or you have any questions, please just stop me and ask away. I mean, it's a really interesting topic, and there's so much, but I'm just going to highlight a couple key provisions that are going to be the most impactful for Newcastle. So the MRTA, as it's referred to, was adopted on March 31st. It legalizes cannabis, smoking cannabis, growing cannabis, selling cannabis, everything. New York is the 15th state, 16 if you count Washington, D.C., to legalize recreational marijuana. Obviously, medical marijuana has been legalized previously. Some of the most important provisions for Newcastle to really keep in mind, and what the town is talking about, is the opt-out authorization. So the MRTA allows municipalities, cities, towns, villages to opt out of allowing specifically adult use retail dispensaries and adult use on-site consumption sites. So those are two types of licenses issued under the law, and the town is allowed to opt out, meaning that the state will not issue licenses for those facilities to operate in the town of Newcastle. If the town of Newcastle wants to opt out, you have to make that decision by December 31st. If you decide you don't want to opt out, you are allowed to adopt reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. If the town opts out and decides after December 31st, 2021, that, you know what, this is actually maybe beneficial, you can change your mind and opt back in. Any local law to opt out is subject to a permissive referendum, which means that the community can sign a petition, and if there's enough signatures on the petition, it goes for a vote. So ultimately, the community really has the decision-making authority for the opt-out local law. Your time, place, and manner restrictions that you can adopt. We've dealt with this issue when we've talked about our vape shops. You want reasonable zoning regulations that allow these facilities to have some option of where they go. If you're choosing to opt in, you can't effectively ban these facilities by adopting too restrictive zoning regulations. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the town code currently, we kind of got ahead of this issue, and we adopted regulations a couple years ago to regulate recreational marijuana facilities. And those regulations are the same regulations that apply to vape shops. So in the town of Newcastle, currently you can't have marijuana retail facilities within 500 feet of any park, playground, library, or religious institution, or within 2,000 feet of any school. So that's already in the town code. So, we really kind of anticipated that this would happen. The MRTA also allows for personal cultivation on private residences. So a private individual can have up to 6 cannabis plants. So that's 3 mature plants and 3 immature plants on your private residence. It has to be, if you're going to have these plants, they have to be in a secure area, meaning that they cannot be accessible by anyone under 21, because you have to be over 21 to have these plants or to smoke cannabis or to buy cannabis. So if it's not in a secure area, it's not going to be permitted. You do not need a license for personal cultivation from the state. You are allowed to just do it. but the municipality is allowed to adopt reasonable regulations. So that's something that the town can consider, reasonable regulations for personal cultivation. For smoking cannabis is prohibited anywhere smoking tobacco is prohibited. The definition of smoking in the public health law pertains to both smoking tobacco and smoking marijuana. And the town is allowed to adopt additional regulations to expand those areas where smoking is prohibited. The town code currently prohibits smoking in town parks. So that, again, that's smoking tobacco and smoking cannabis is prohibited in town parks. Municipalities, cities, towns, villages, counties, you are preempted from adopting any law, rule, ordinance, or regulation that pertains to the operation or the licensing of registered organizations, adult use cannabis licenses, or hemp licenses. So that includes any regulations pertaining to on-site consumption site licenses, processing licenses, cultivator licenses, anything that the state is dealing with, the town cannot regulate those. Again, you are allowed to adopt reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions for on-site consumption sites and for those retail dispensaries. There is a notification requirement in the MRTA that if anyone is obtaining a license for a retail dispensary or on-site consumption establishment in the town will be notified and will have an opportunity to provide comments to the state, and those comments are to be taken into account by the state when they're issuing these licenses. So they won't just show up. We'll have our zoning regulations in place, and you also have this notification requirement. Now, I think the biggest talk of the town are the tax benefits. So there's a 13% sales tax on cannabis sales in New York. 9% is going to go to the state and 4% goes to the municipalities. And of that 4%, 1% goes to the counties and the 3% will go to the town. And then if there's a village in the town, they have to work out an agreement. But if there is a facility in the town of Newcastle, you will get some tax benefits from that. So that is a very quick overview of some of the key provisions of cannabis and what we anticipate the discussion is going to be about going forward. Any questions?
I'll jump in, and then other town board members can weigh in if they have any questions or thoughts on what you've presented, Drew. Thank you very much. That was really an excellent and very succinct presentation. So
it's really quick. I'm usually good with PowerPoints. I feel it's more engaging, so I'm sorry. Next time.
The question for me is, when the board enacted the local legislation in 2019, where we made the sort of changes to our zoning code and enacted them as law, my recollection of the impetus behind what we were doing at that time was we didn't have the ability at that time to opt out because it wasn't allowed. So instead, we took proactive steps through our zoning code to try to have almost the same impact of limiting where cannabis rather would be able to be sold in our community. And so we attempted to do that through zoning. Had opt-out been an option at that time, I believe that the town board at that time would have taken that action. And I think that was what the community was asking of us at that time. That said, we didn't have that ability then. So the first question that I have is, if we can follow up and have a clearer understanding of where within town you would be able to cite a marijuana dispensary based on our zoning code that we enacted in 2019. I think that would be helpful to this conversation, as well as having some clarity around whether we think that what we have done there would qualify as a reasonable restriction with regard to the sale. And so that's kind of the threshold question for me, is just to try to understand whether we should be going down the route of opt-out or if we are essentially covered by what we've done so far. And then the two other kind of questions that I'd be looking to you all to provide some additional guidance is around the personal cultivation. So you mentioned that municipalities have the ability to enact reasonable regulations. So what are reasonable regulations when it comes to personal cultivation? So having kind of a better understanding of that definition of reasonable regulations, maybe taking a look at, sort of what other municipalities are considering enacting there, whether it's, the height of the fence, the setback from the property line, does it need to be in a shed, this and that, just to kind of understand what our options are there and what things we should be thinking of. I don't personally cultivate marijuana, nor have I looked into the matter. So I'm not even really sure what the questions are that we should be asking there. So a little bit more research on that point. And then the third thing, and this is probably the easiest one to look at, but is just with regard to the smoking regulations, just having a better understanding of where within town you can smoke today. You mentioned that it's prohibited in town parks, but is it allowed on other town properties? Is it allowed around town hall? Is it allowed in the train station, parking lot, so on and so forth, just so we have a better picture of what is regulated today, so that we can maybe understand where we think additional regulations would be required. So that's my feedback based on what you did. Thanks.
And then my question too, I know we discussed it a little earlier, but in terms of commercial cultivation, I know the legislation is currently evolving on that, but if you could be able to provide us guidance there too, so we can see if there's anything that we either can do or should do or need to be aware of regarding where that might happen if it does. What the current legislation requires and what our options are there as well.
Sure, and just so the public's aware, in case I wasn't clear, the MRTA is very clear that the town can adopt reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions for on-site consumption establishments and retail dispensaries. The law does not provide the same language for these commercial growing facilities, which would be under a adult use cultivator license and a processor license. So the ability for the town to regulate those facilities through zoning is still unclear, and we're looking more into that.
Right. So when you get more information on that and the legislation evolves a bit, I'd love to make sure you fill us in on that.
Definitely.
And then as we
Drew, can you hear me?
earlier,
Okay.
it's okay. Understanding time and place restrictions for transient events like street festivals, book festival, farmers market, those kinds of things that would otherwise on other days just be public spaces where smoking might be allowable.
Got it.
To that end, to follow up on what Lori said and what Ivy said, I'd be curious just for more detail about where we can regulate just in general. Yeah, we're saying not on parks, but how far can we regulate in terms of smoking? I think that's a critical issue. And also, I don't know if you've done so or you can do so, but I'd be curious to know similar sized municipalities in other states that have legalized marijuana. What type of, if there's a way to figure out how much these dispensaries sold cannabis, and then we could figure out sort of what we might be looking at in terms of actual dollar generation. Because when people hear 3% or taxes, are we talking 3% of $500,000 or 3% of $2 million? So I think we need to understand what these numbers are, and maybe we can see similarly sized communities in similar metropolitan areas, relatively speaking, to see what they've done in terms of their sales and taxes.
Or 3% of $2,000.
You broke up. I think you're making fun of math, but I wasn't doing any math problems. It was merely, I'm just curious.
Both of those numbers seem really big to me. Like, I don't think it would be $500,000 worth of.
Right. I think the numbers are going to be pretty small and insignificant.
Right.
But let's see. I mean, in whatever state had it, a municipality of 15, 20,000 people.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, I think it's also a function. I don't know if there's a way to tell. I think it's also a function of how many dispensaries, if we did have one, how many other dispensaries are in a close geographical area. Because if there aren't any, the numbers will be much
certainly.
higher. If there are many, then they'll be low. So, I don't know that there's a way to predict that, but certainly as other towns around us are looking at this legislation, we should be able to, glean some of that a bit. And then Drew, can you just remind everyone, so this would be legislation, and I've just, this has been a hot topic the last week or two. So, as I've been talking to people, I hear a lot of residents, some are in favor of having one and some are not in favor of having one. So just to confirm, we will be having a public hearing on this. Where
Yeah,
people
so
will be allowed to speak and let us know their thoughts on this.
absolutely. So there's actually a couple local laws that would be at play. You have the opt-out local law, which we would do separately because it alone is subject to a permissive referendum. We would do a local law to clean up the code. So if the town decides to opt out, you'd have a separate local law to delete the definitions of marijuana, to delete the provisions that are currently in the code for marijuana recreational facilities. If the town wants to adopt legislation for personal cultivation, that's going to be its own local law. Same thing with smoking requirements in the town code. So that's a fourth local law. And if you decide to stay in and, not opt out, you're going to have a local law to clean up the code because the MRTA doesn't actually use the word marijuana. It uses the word cannabis. So we'd want to make sure that all the definitions, all the provisions match up with the state. So that would be, another change. So this isn't going to kind of fly under the radar. This will very much be a public process, and there's a bunch of different ways we can do it. But it all requires legislation at the town level and changes to the town code. So the public will have opportunities to comment. Because as you just heard me say, it is multiple local laws depending on what we're going to do.
Thanks.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah,
So I think
no,
we have a couple of items to follow up on, and it's good that we have until the end of the year so that we can do our due diligence and make sure we make smart decisions.
absolutely. We have time, and Newcastle, as always, is at the forefront of this issue, kind of making the decisions before a lot of other municipalities. So there are pros and cons to that, but we're on top of this, doing our due diligence to make sure we know the law and can steer the town in the right direction and help you make, good decisions for the community.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay, so with that said, thank you to our Sustainability Advisory Board who's joined us this evening. We have been, as those of you who are frequent viewers of the Town Board show know, we have been doing sort of regular meetings with all of our boards and commissions where we ask folks to come join us for a joint meeting and hear about the sort of important project work that they're working on and think together about how the town board can support them in those efforts. So this evening, we're joined by the Sustainability Advisory Board. And Steve, maybe I'll turn it over to you as the chair of the board to introduce who you have with you this evening and to walk us through your agenda.
Great, thanks, Ivy. If it's okay with you, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see that.
We can. Yep, looks great.
Perfect, thanks. So first of all, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to hear about our initiatives. And also thank you for your continuing support. So many of you supported us in the past, and of course we have Lori Martin, who's now essentially joined us, I suppose. Maybe those are the wrong words to use, but has come to the meetings and has been very supportive. So thank you very much for that. So we have a really committed group of people, and it goes way beyond the folks that you will see here. But tonight, some of the leaders of our key initiatives are here to present. We've actually expanded over the past 12 months. And I think, despite everything that's going on, there are a lot of reasons people are more committed to than ever, just generally, to what we all want to accomplish. We understand what the problems are, the existential threat of climate change. And I think part of the thing that's prompted people is that the federal government just was doing absolutely nothing, or perhaps better is to say it was going backwards. And so the local effort became so much more important than ever before. And now to turn that around, it looks like the federal government is doing or is about to do so much more than ever, and we can help to multiply that effort from a local perspective. So it's we're all really gratified to be able to see that, and we're excited to move forward. So we're going to talk about, of course, what's going on, just to give you some sense of the kinds of things that we're not doing yet, but we look at a lot of different things to find out and analyze them. What should we be doing? Some of those things, and I will change my slide here. There we go. Some of the things that we are looking at right now are more chargers for EVs. And the reasons that we would do this, of course, are for folks in town to be able to charge their EVs, for example, when they go to the train station. For people who might want to come in and patronize our restaurants and other stores, it's an opportunity to charge. And also to do our part for people transiting the state north to south along public highways. We would want to be able to put EV chargers in places where either at or even near fossil fuel stations, currently known as gas stations. So that would help us to we would help to transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. So that's being analyzed, and we think that that's the right thing to do. There are some pretty great incentives out there now where we could potentially put in chargers at no cost to the town whatsoever, or if any cost, very little. Another thing that came up recently is the ability to retrofit diesel trucks, whether it's snow plows, garbage trucks, other kinds of municipal trucks, and retrofit them completely for biodiesel. And the company not only retrofits it, and it's a low capex for the retrofit, but they'll help define the biodiesel. And again, with that, like with everything else, it takes a lot of analysis. What are going to be the costs, not only in the capex, but operations maintenance, and then the operations, including the cost of biodiesel, compared with the fuel that it would be replacing. But that could be a big deal. A lot of these trucks get like 4 to 6 miles to the gallon and spew out quite a bit of greenhouse gases and particulate matter that's, well, bad for all of us, but certainly folks who have breathing difficulty. And then pay as you throw, which is a way of getting people to reduce their waste. Of course, if you create a lot of waste, you'd end up paying more if you find ways, and we would help folks find ways if we thought this made sense to do, of reducing their waste, then they would pay less if they reduce. So just some things that we're looking at for the future. We're not saying we're going to necessarily do these, but if we did decide, we would provide you with the analysis. So this is our.
Steve, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Charging stations. How many charging stations do we currently have in town, and do we have data on their usage?
I don't know offhand the number. I do have those statistics, and I can send it to you.
I'm sorry, I must interrupt. You must have missed the memo that I sent to you just moments before the town board meeting started with our list of charging stations, the usage, and your opinion as to whether or not we should continue to have them be free. We currently have 6 charging stations.
Jill, way to put him on the spot.
I get to do it so infrequently. He's always topping me. It's unbelievable.
Crunch
Anyway.
numbers and come up with your recommendation on that yet?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and actually we have a lot of logic around, how much we should charge and things like that, and for whom, and what types of controls are on the chargers. Free's good for folks in town. Do we necessarily want to make them free for people who are coming up to Taconic? Maybe not so sure about that. But it depends on what types of controls that we're allowed to put on the chargers. So we want to think through that a little bit more. So no, I won't answer on this spot about that. No recommendation offhand.
And then Steve, I'm trying to remember, do we have any fines around blocking them? Like non-electric cars parking in spots that are charging stations?
I think there's something in the train station, but I don't know, Jill, if you have the answer to that offhand.
Yeah, we require for prime hours. So let's say from, I think it's after 9:30 in the morning, if there is no car parked at the charging station, anyone with a clean pass can park there. But otherwise they are reserved for the charging cars initially, to try to encourage people, in addition to the clean pass spots, those prime spots, trying to preserve the charging spots for those who come later. But only in the train station, not in Gedney, not in Allen Place, and not in South Greeley.
If you folks do pursue these chargers, I'd also love to look at those superchargers that charge a car in like 30 minutes or something, where it gives, like Tesla's, like their full charge. Is that what they're called? Superchargers?
Yeah, so Tesla has those, and they are specific to Tesla only. It's in 30 minutes you can get a good number of miles, but it declines as your batteries, as you get closer and closer to your full range, then it gets slower. They have what are called level 2 chargers, which are actually pretty quick. But to get down to what most folks would like, which is a full charge, say 250 to 300 miles inside of 15 minutes, will take a change to the batteries. And no one has those, including Tesla, yet. But those are coming out, maybe 2024, 2025, but they are certainly coming. But they can't do it yet because, we can go into battery tech. If you're really interested, I'm happy to have a side discussion with you about battery technology. Charging too quickly would harm the batteries, and it reduces the number of cycles, meaning how many times you can discharge and then charge the batteries.
Got it.
Last year, pre-pandemic, I had a couple of conversations with some folks at Tesla, actually, who I randomly happened to be sitting next to one day at Whole Foods. And then they put me in touch with some folks in the company about the idea of trying to get a Tesla supercharger somewhere in town. And I pitched them downtown Chappaqua, and they really wanted it to be at Chappaqua Crossing. And so I put them in touch with the Summit Greenfield folks. And I don't actually know. Like I said, this was sort of right before the pandemic hit. I don't actually know what happened. I don't think there's a Tesla supercharger at Chappaqua Crossing, so it must have fallen through. So I'll make a note, and Steve, I'll copy you on that and just reach back out to them and see if they have any interest in revisiting the conversation.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think it was having Tesla chargers, well, first of all, we should have chargers at Chappaqua Crossing. Having Tesla chargers there, would be good, but having more generic chargers would be even better so that everybody can use them, because Teslas can use other chargers. Other cars that are non-Teslas cannot use Tesla chargers. So
my understanding was that and maybe it's like this with all EVs, but that there's like a culture of Tesla drivers who are like constantly looking for where they can go to get one of these superchargers. So if you have a supercharger, it's a way of like drawing people to your town to shop there. So like, if you had one in downtown Chappaqua, people would come in and then they'd come shopping in our downtown. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all chargers, not necessarily just Tesla chargers. Again, Volvo, Jaguar, Porsche, VW, BMW. I mean, everybody's coming out. GM, Ford, they're all coming out with EVs. So if we have limited space and kind of has limited load capacity, I would want to make, I have a Tesla, so I mean, I'd love to get a Tesla charger, but I think we need to open it up so that everybody can use it. So I want to be a little bit careful about being so specific about.
That's helpful.
How do we feel about adding, I don't know if we have any in Millwood, but adding some to Millwood. I appreciate that part of the connection here is the train station, but I would think it would still be a draw in Millwood.
Yeah, I definitely think we should. And the incentives that are available now from the state, from both the state, is it department, I can't remember which department, but NYSERDA and some of the department, they will allow private parking lots as long as people can go there, not driveways obviously, but parking lots to take advantage of those incentives. So those could definitely happen, like at the Chico's. We could potentially put it at the ball field.
So we have plans to put it at the ball field. We're wiring those now. We have at Gedney. Let's see. We have toyed with the idea of putting them at the parks. So Glacier and Glacier and possibly Whippoorwill going forward, and upgrading the ones that we have. So, people are talking about the high speed ones, but right now we've got like first generation chargers, and, we need to, bring them at least up into the 21st century. So we're slugging along there.
So Steve, I know you have so much to talk about. We haven't let you get past your first bullet.
It's a good bullet though.
Good questions though. Thanks. Okay, unless there's anything else, we will jump right into the clean energy communities and climate smart communities. And I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks to the town board for having us. This is great. Members of the Sustainability Advisory Board have been working with Sabrina and Kellen of the town's planning division on 2 New York State programs that are interrelated. And those are the Clean Energy Communities Leadership Round and the Climate Smart Communities Program. The CEC is a NYSERDA program, and the CSC is a Department of Environmental Conservation program, and also some other departments are involved with that program. So the goals of these 2 programs is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to the effects of climate change. And what are the benefits of us participating? Well, what the programs do is they provide us a framework for taking actions against climate change. And it gives us opportunities for grants within the 2 programs. We also, because of the programs, we have these opportunities for networking with other towns and learning about best practices with those towns. And New York State gives us the opportunity to get expert guidance and resources from the state to help us with these programs. So if we become a certified climate smart community, we're recognized as a leader in adapting to climate change, and we're also supporting a green economy. And the community is benefiting by us being involved with these programs with improved air quality, conservation of green spaces, having energy reliability, and cost savings, depending on what actions we actually take with the programs. So what I'd like to do is talk about each program a little bit. So maybe next slide, Steve. The Clean Energy Communities Leadership Round gives us opportunities for grants. And there are point-based grants where if we have 3,000 points under the program, we can get a $10,000 grant. If we have 4,000 points, we can get a $20,000 grant. And if we have 5,000 points, we could get a $70,000 grant if the grants are still there available, because there are a limit in the number of grants that the New York State is providing. And then there are 2 action grants. If we, the town, adopted the New York Stretch Energy Code, we could get a $5,000 grant. And if we did a community campaign like Community Solar, we could also get a $5,000 grant. So we have lots of opportunities for grants. Right now, Newcastle has 2,900 points, and that's because we had submitted for the 5 actions that are shown on the screen. So we are 100 points away from the $10,000 grant, and I just submitted one more action for 200 points. And so we will cross over, as soon as we get approval, we'll cross over the 3,000 point threshold and be entitled to a $10,000 grant.
Yay.
So Steve, next slide. Now the Climate Smart Communities program is the program that primarily is with the Department of Environmental Conservation. And we have a task force that's being put in place that is working towards bronze certification. So the way this works is we accumulate points for various actions that either have been done and where you need to document them, or we will do some actions and get more points. And the bronze certification getting towards has a July 2nd submission. So we need to get enough of these actions submitted by July 2nd. And there are over 100 actions that we are looking at. So I have 2 examples here on the slide. One is benchmarking government building energy use. We do that right now. And so we've submitted documentation for that, and we got 4 points for that. And LED streetlights, conversion of our streetlights to LED, which the town already, we're getting 12 points for that action. So we're in the process of looking at all of these actions and deciding what can we submit documentation for, what can we support. And we've already identified that we have more than enough points to get the 120 points and bronze certification. We just need to get it all done and by July 2nd. And so when I talked about the 2 programs being interrelated, once we get the CSC certification, the Climate Smart Community certification, that then provides us points under the Clean Energy Communities program. And by getting those points, we're then back to having possibly an additional grant opportunity under CEC. So we're about to have 3,000 points. Once we get that certification would give us another 600 points, and we could be very close to getting 4,000 points, which would give us another $20,000 grant if we get it all submitted in time and the grants are still there. What also Climate Smart Communities offers us is occasionally the Climate Smart Communities program has other grants that become available over time. So those grants can come up, and we may have, once we have this certification, we may have another opportunity to get some grants. Our future goal is to accumulate enough points, 300 points, so that we can get silver certification. And we're right now trying to determine how many points do we really have and how close are we to silver. So that's the 2 programs that I was going to talk about. Any questions on that?
All right.
Jennifer, I just wanted to thank you and the Sustainability Board and the Town Hall staff who have been working toward the documentation, the robust documentation that's required to to submit for these certifications. I know it's a significant effort, but boy, I think it's absolutely worth it and worth prioritizing. And I hope that that we can do everything we can to make sure we meet the deadlines and get our applications in so that we have a chance at these grants. Certainly, this is just a huge win for the town in pursuing this. And of course, it's not only, the philosophical and tangible goal of making it a better place to live, but also just reducing the costs for the town to operate and, and having and bringing in some income that can be put toward improving it even further. So thank you guys for your hard work on this.
Thanks,
Jennifer,
Lori.
can I actually ask
Thanks for saying that, Lori. Yeah, Jennifer is just, along with Sabrina and Kellen, but she's just really put an enormous amount of time and effort into this. I appreciate you recognizing that. The kinds of things that that we're doing and that are now, we can get the recognition for. I think all towns, all municipalities are going to have to do this in the future. Now we're taking advantage of the fact that we're one of the first. We can set an example for others and also get those grants. And that's why the grants are available, so that somebody will step out first and do them and show others how to do it. So anyway, thank you, Jennifer.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in? I did have one question. I'm sorry. Just with regard to the grants that you're eligible for under the clean energy communities, I assume that those grants go for other future clean energy projects, or do they cover work already in progress? And then like specifically around the stretch energy code, which is one of the things that we're, as you know, but as not everybody knows, one of the things that we're now looking at how we can advance. If we do that, does that $5,000 cover the the work to draft the code and that, or does it cover the implementation of the code?
Yeah, it would. You would need to adopt the code in order to then get the $5,000, which you could then use for another clean energy action.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it's not tied to the.
It's not tied to the New York Stretch Energy Code.
Got it.
If you adopt, I mean, we're kind of pushing that you, I hope, will adopt the New York Stretch Energy Code. Number one, you get $5,000 just by adopting it. Number two, you get a lot of points for adopting it, which then moves you into more grant opportunities. So there's good reasons to do it money-wise. So
I love it. They've like totally figured it out. Like the gamification of how to get me to want to be more clean energy. I'm all in.
Yeah, right.
I want more points. Okay, that's actually super helpful. Thank you. Sorry to throw you off.
No.
Okay, so you're probably aware that the current waste contract is expiring. The SAB is weighing in on the RFP. So for this, I will turn it over to Jennifer.
So yes, the waste management contract is expiring at the end of this year. And we're working with DPW on the RFP, and what we've asked DPW to do, and we provided some suggested language to do this, we'd like to consider two future options. One is curbside food scrap recycling. We have the food scrap recycling program right now, which is great, but everyone has to bring their food scraps to the recycling center and drop off there. We'd like to consider a curbside program, and it will be very interesting to see what the proposed contractors come back with on curbside. And the second future option that we've asked to be included in the RFP is pay as you throw, which Steve mentioned before. And at some point, we'd like an opportunity to come back and talk about both of these two options. But we would like in the proposals that we receive to hear what proposed contractors are suggesting with pay-as-you-throw, and would like to consider it as something for the future. So the RFPs are in the process of being drafted. The RFP is in the process of being drafted right now, and the expectation is that it should go out in the end of April or May. And I would expect that the selection would happen sometime in August or September.
So Jennifer, I know we talked about this a little bit, but I can't remember if I asked you this exact question. Do we have data from other municipalities that have gone from a drop-off food scrap recycling to curbside, and what they experienced in terms of the number of participating households, and how we might calculate what our solid waste savings might be once we offered curbside, if we were able to?
So we don't have a lot of data on that at this point in time. The only Westchester town that I can think of right now that's doing it is Scarsdale, and they have their own trucks, so they are able to do it with their own trucks. But I don't have that information right now. That's something we'd like to try to get more information on, and on how much it increases participation. And it's something we'll take a look at.
I think you were telling me, right, that with the food scrap recycling we have now, it's about 1% of the solid waste mass right now.
Right.
Something like that. So we'd need to get it higher than that to pay for itself.
Right. Right. But I mean, I'm a strong believer in, if you switch to curbside, you would get a lot more participation. It just makes it so much easier for people to do it. So
yeah, absolutely. I hope we can make it work, or at the very minimum find a transition point where it could be a paid service for the folks who want to participate, if it's not feasible this year.
Do we know, Jennifer, how many people are participating in that generally?
We do know. I think if anyone else is on this call, I think it's about 300 households, maybe 350.
Yeah, that's within the ballpark of what I think I'd heard, that we were approaching 400.
So just make sure, if we're going to include this as a future option, that it's included as an add-on and wouldn't kind of muddy the actual RFP. Because I think we have 7,500 homes. So 300, obviously this wouldn't pay for itself right now, but maybe it would in the future.
Right. Yeah, this would be the way the RFP will be structured. It will be totally carved out as a future option with a whole separate cost structure. So yeah, we'll have that.
Yeah, we're using that as really an input for our analysis, and whether it goes past that or not, we'll have to determine that. Okay, any other questions? Thanks, Jennifer.
Yep.
Leaf blowers. I think you've heard of this before. We worked on this for, I don't know, since the past century. The group of Tracy and Kathy and Jennifer, and especially Rand, who's just put, I don't know, maybe hundreds of hours into it. Finally, it's being implemented, and will go into effect soon. So now the next step, as promised, is Rand and the team are working on how do we communicate this to the important stakeholders.
So hello there all. It's nice to see you all. I was getting lonely. So let me take you a little bit through what we've been doing. And we're starting to roll out education now. The theme that we're going to be using is keeping Newcastle clean and quiet. We've put together a 3 to 4 minute introduction video. This is one of the slides from the video that we use in a webinar that I'll talk about in a few minutes. But the whole idea is to try to roll out a positive image of why we've passed legislation to ban motorized leaf blowers during June 1st through September 30th. Steve, if you can go to the next slide, please. So the education that we're trying to do, it really has a bunch of components to it. COVID has probably limited what we can do that we might have done in other time periods. So the education that we're rolling out deals with signage, the signage being the Chappaqua electronic sign, and you see a sample of what we're going to be posting on that signage down below there, which says keeping Newcastle clean and quiet. Gas leaf blowers are not permitted June 1st through September 30th. Instead of being a black background, we will be using color, most likely green, I think is what we're looking to do. And that will be on the electronic sign in Chappaqua. In Millwood, we're going to have obviously we don't have an electronic sign there, so we're going to be having a printed banner in Millwood. We're also going to have bridge banners put up so that when you cross the bridge, you'll see facsimile of that same message with an icon that has a picture of somebody blowing leaves with a circle and a cross through it, saying you can't do it. We're also looking to have in the newsletter something posted running every week into June with the same message, keeping Newcastle quiet and clean. Next slide, Steve. In the town mailer, we'll also be sending out something that also goes more into the legislation as well, giving what you can and cannot do. On one side, it will be in English. On the other side, we will have it in multi-languages. 4 languages, I believe, is what we agreed to. We will also have that same mailer at the public events like the farmers market and any other public events that we can find to distribute it. This is where COVID is coming and raising its ugly head. There isn't that many public events that we can find to attend. Maybe this summer that will change as more and more people get inoculated and we have other events occurring that we can attend and get that out. And then the last thing is webinar series. We already had one in conjunction with the Newcastle Healthy Odds group. It was recorded. We will have another one. It starts off with a 3 to 5 minute video that I recorded, and we will refine that. My melodious voice was in it. I don't know if anyone attended that, but we'll have another one at the end of April, and we're going to try to find other affiliate organizations that will help us, and the SAB itself will try to get it out there. But we are looking for any organization that will be willing to host us. It's usually about a 40-minute presentation with a Q&A. The last one went for an hour in length. And that's what our program of education is. Questions?
Ran, I remember in one of the meetings about this, that there was going to be a flyer that that could be given to the police officers. So if a complaint was called in, that they would have some material that they could hand to a landscaper without necessarily like invoking a penalty situation, but a communication opportunity.
That will probably be the town mailer. That flyer, we hope will explain all of the rules in it, which is the way that we'll educate the public. So on one side, it'll be in English. The other side will have Spanish and other languages. French, Hindu, I think was one of the ones that we'd have on the other side of it. We looked at the fact that enforcement is going to be difficult. We don't expect the police to be going out and giving out tickets. We expect if called, we do need to have some way that law enforcement can, explain what can and cannot be done in a peaceful manner. And yes, we will be giving it to them as well to be able to hand out.
I'm wondering if maybe we can have them at some of our local businesses too, gas stations and coffee shops where we're expecting people, some of the people that work in town to stop by and maybe see it.
We would love if the, storefronts, if the stores within town would be willing to hand them out, we'd be more than happy to do that as well. That was one of the discussions we've had within the group. Our only concern is we don't want to create more litter, more paper that's just going to go to waste. So we have to be very cautious about that as an SAB. Our job is not to create more stuff.
On
Rand, might
the
I
mailer,
offer?
it's sort of obvious, but I'm sure you thought about this, but we should encourage people to make sure that they communicate with their landscapers
Right. And
so that they're just not taking the paper going, okay, well, it can encourage that they speak to their landscapers as well.
Right, right. I totally agree with you, Lisa. And that's what the mailer is all about. The mailer is to educate the homeowner, and on the flip side, to be able to have it in a language. And I don't want to be, saying that all landscapers don't speak English, but that was the idea of putting it into another language so that they can hand it to their landscaper who might not be able to read English as well, and having them be able to read it on the other side.
Rand, I'm sure you thought about this as well, but distributing the mailers where people purchase and also have serviced landscape equipment. So where the landscapers go to bring their machines to be serviced and purchase new ones.
That's a
Would
good,
probably be a fertile ground for just leaving a pile of these.
we-
Back 100 years ago, like when we first started talking about this legislation, Rob and I went to Austining
Austining, right.
lawnmowers.
Yep.
That's what I
And
was thinking of.
Yeah, I still have it on my desk because it was so great. They put together a little quarter-page flyer that they had right next to the cash register that had Austining's local law, and it was just a perfectly succinct version of the local law that they could hand out. I kept it on my desk. I literally think it's still on my desk because it was such a really good distillation of their local law. So if we could do something similar, I bet those guys would be happy to have it there. I know a lot of our landscapers, he told us when we were there, and I wish I remembered that gentleman's name so I could reference him, but I don't. But he told us a lot of our landscapers are over there too, and MF Pinto and Thornwood, right? So there's a couple.
No, that's a great point, and we will drop it off at Austin. And Ivy, if you don't mind shooting a copy of it to me, that might be
I'll have
something.
to go into the office. Believe it or not, I'm not actually at town hall.
No, that's great. We will drop copies off there.
Any other questions?
Well, I thank you. It's nice seeing you all again.
All right, so laws and some of these other direct actions that we're taking are important. Big part of it also is showing people how they can make changes themselves and encouraging them to help making those changes. And for that, I'll turn it over to Alicia to talk about our education initiative.
I think Maxine was going to take the first bit, and then I was going to talk about the second slide.
Okay. And Maxine. Maxine, you may need to unmute.
Hi, everybody. Sorry. None of the initiatives or all the work that we're doing, it needs to go out into the citizens of Newcastle. And there's different ways of doing that. We've tried and have been successful, in putting out documentaries and series and having speakers. And that's when CPAC was open and the library was open, and now it's a different story and everything is virtual. We just had 2 virtual programs, one on Sunday. Tracy Stein was amazing, getting it all together and everyone helping on youth environment advocacy and having a portion of the program, or most of it, with environmental justice and climate justice, and speakers who were really wonderful and gave people information. Taylor Morton of We Act and John Opperman of Earth Day Initiative, because it is Earth Month, everybody. Just know that Earth Day's coming up. So we want to get the green out. And when you did the marijuana thing, I was thinking, hey, talk about a green initiative in a strange way. No pun intended. And Jose Contreras from Sorrel One. So these people were wonderful. And I think the program really gave those who were listening and part of it a really good idea of what, and also Amanda Cronin, who was on the SAB as a Greeley student, who's a youth activist. And then we had the leaf blower ordinance webinar, ran with Healthy Yards. I think it's important to partner with, organizations, within our realm, especially Healthy Yards, and also with the Conservation Board, to do more outreach and getting the education of the leaf blower law is something that's really important. We have to keep the Newcastle Clean and Quiet thing, not quiet, but really out there and doing webinars and publicizing. Because, I spoke to the new people who live in my area. They didn't know anything about it. So we have to really figure out how to outreach, publicize, social media, print, whatever we can do, including Newcastle media. We'd like to get stuff on the town channel that they have. So we need to work with the town board or with Jill or however it works, because we were told initially that we have to pay for certain things. And I would think that since this is a town ordinance, that the NCCMC would be available to us to use to put programs up, that have been already recorded. So that's that. So if you can put it to the next slide, and Alicia, can you talk about the rest of this page?
Okay. Fingers crossed that a child does not jump in. That's why I had Maxine talk, because I'm unmuting. And so starting in June, we're hoping to have a series of virtual programs that we'll probably entitle Making Newcastle Green. The purpose of the series, is to provide Newcastle residents with information to make sustainable changes to their lifestyles. We have a lot of new neighbors in the last year who might be willing to make the larger upgrades to their long-term investments to their homes, like solar, convert to geothermal, add heat pumps, et cetera, because they're going to be in their houses hopefully for the next 20, 30 years. There's also a lot of the long-term residents who might not know about the topics we're working on, such as the food scrap recycling program and what to recycle and how to recycle right. So the idea for these programs is to have a professional or two speak on the different topics, how the technology works, what's involved in getting it into your homes, what the return on investment is, available financing. And then one or two neighbors who've implemented each of the initiatives will discuss their experience with it, why they decided to choose it for their home. It's really like a neighbor to neighbor discussion, because we really feel like that's the best way to share the word about these initiatives. We're still kind of bouncing around the idea if anyone has ideas about when to take place. It could be a 9 a.m. coffee talk or a lunch and learn or evening programs, and maybe we'll divvy it up so that way to engage as many residents as possible. But again, some topics that we might choose are solar, heat pumps, energy efficiency, creating an envelope of your home, geothermal, more on electric vehicles. So just hopefully a program like that, it'll kind of be very similar to the Newcastle Healthy Yards Green Yard Gab Fest that they've been hosting on Saturdays, just a regular informational session.
Great. I think that's good. I think we'll try to see how we can start one and get it under our belt and see how it goes. Now, in terms of what we've done a lot in the past, as I said, we had documentary screenings. In the past, we've had Biggest Little Farm, Wasted, the story of food waste. We had a cooking demo at that one. Biggest Little Farm, we had a farmer speak. We had Baggett, Slingshot, Planet Ocean. all taking place either at CPAC or the library. And we had some really great response and a lot of really wonderful programs. I don't know when this pandemic will permit us to use those facilities again. I'm hoping maybe in the fall. I
You
like
can
this.
actually use Chat Pack now as of April 2nd.
Can you? Can we? To what capacity?
It has to be 50% capacity up to 150 people, I think.
Right. This
Wow.
is right.
This is good to know. All right. I will jot that down. So maybe we can do a movie screening of Kiss the Ground, which is, Woody Harrelson narrates it. It's basically trying to educate people about the soil and about how tilling is kind of destroying it, and that soil erosion is adding to climate change, and that regenerative farming is becoming something very, that a lot of farmers are looking into it. And it's a way of farming better. They actually have it in Biggest Little Farm, so that's an example of it. I wanted to do maybe a Zoom or maybe in person, if that ever is, of how to talk to your kids about climate change. Harriet Sugarman wrote a book, which is fabulous, and she would, be happy to do a program here, because I've spoken to her and I know her, and I think it would be a good program for especially parents of younger kids to know how to, bring up the subject, because kids know about it and they hear about it. And there's ways to talk about it that are better than other ways without scaring them, and then getting them to be more active, and they're the future. So that's something that I think we can do. And then there's Project Drawdown. They also would come here any of this could be virtual, except for the Kiss the Ground, I think. And they can talk about, what the Project Drawdown's about. Georgetown is getting the levels of greenhouse gases down, and how to get it in decline and reach, to stop climate change. And there's 100 ways. There's a book that was a bestseller by Paul Hawken. I don't know if you can see it, but anyway, I think, the whole idea of any of this is to get the word out about what we're doing, what we can do for the town, and people in town to know that it's important to be proactive, and that programs are being, done in town, initiatives, and the town board and the SAB work together to get really, great initiatives out to try to make this place a cleaner place, and for the future of our kids and grandkids. And, there's other things you can do. I think I was, mulling around an idea, because a lot of towns are doing it now. Towns are having their own podcasts, and podcasts are pretty popular. And I was just throwing out that in my brain, maybe the town and maybe the library could work to put a podcast studio in within CCMC, and then we can, ask a town board, ask a DPW, you can go down the line, and then you can also do programs about sustainability. Just a thought I wanted to throw out. But anyway.
Maxine, I apologize. Vivek has a call coming up, and I wanted
Sure, I'm done.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay.
Any questions on the education?
No, Maxine, I love the podcast idea, though. There's so much content, and so much content that's being generated by our advisory boards, that it would be wonderful to make it more portable for people.
Yeah, I think people would listen also. I mean, it's something that's being done all across the country now. So I had it as a throwaway, but I think it's really important. Maybe we can, look into it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And Maxine, email me if you want to talk about Chat Pack. I'll help you out.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Vivek, if you're still there, I know you've got a call coming up, but whatever you can do.
Sure, I'm here. I also realize I'm probably in between some of you and your dinner and others of you in your beds. So I'll try and keep this short. Let me start off by summarizing what Westchester Power is. As most of you know, your electricity is delivered to you by Con Ed, our utility, but the supply itself comes from a different entity. For most of us, that's Westchester Power, and what it is a community choice aggregator. What they do is they take all of our demand and pool it together, and they then go out and take that entire demand and get an RFP to lower our collective supply prices, right? And then they contract with what is known as an ESCO, an energy electricity supply company, to provide that supply. So the names to remember are Westchester Power, that's the community choice aggregator. Sustainable Westchester is the nonprofit based out of Mount Kisco that manages Westchester Power. And Constellation New Energy is the ESCO that they've contracted, which that actually generates the electrons that come into our house. So with that background, back in fall of 2020, the Westchester Power Program, which originally started in 2016, back in the fall of 2020, it was up for a contract renewal. And at that time, the Sustainability Advisory Board recommended, and you at the town board approved the town staying with the Westchester Power Program for the foreseeable future. And following that, Westchester Power went out and got a bid. The lowest cost provider was Constellation New Energy, the ESCO, and they've got now an 18-month extension of the contract there. So what we did at SAB associated with that was based on our history of prior contract renewals, we realized that people typically get excited when this comes front and center. Quite naturally, our utility costs are amongst our largest expenses, and so it is an area that's dear to most of us. And so what we've done in the past and what we did again this time was to make sure that we over communicated, right? So we did this blitz of communication in every form possible, that we could think of. Westchester Power itself sent out letters, but in addition to that, we sent out a flyer along with the DPW mailing that went out in December. Jill helped us out by putting in a blurb in the town newsletter that Ivy sends out every week, and then in addition to that, we made sure that the Sustainability Advisory Board's website was updated with all the information that we could have. So the DPW mailer had our own letter in the front and an FAQ at the back. But then we added a more detailed FAQ on the website where people could go in and dig through it. And then we also communicated via Facebook, a couple of different groups within Facebook that's quite popular with the town. Steve, can we go to the next slide? So, we didn't get a lot of feedback questions but via traditional methods. There were some phone calls that Jill's team at Town Hall fielded and transferred over to us at the SAB, and there were some emails that came through as well that were forwarded along, and some directly to SAB as well. So in all, I think between me and Steve and Jennifer and others, we probably fielded about 10 direct communications. But then Facebook was another story, of course. I counted up my responses as about 50 posts to questions that came up. I'm sure there's multiples of those that I missed, and Alicia and others address some of them as well. So there was a lot more engagement on Facebook. A lot of the questions related to a general confusion on what Westchester Power is. Opportunistically, some other ESCOs sent out emails. I don't know if it was evil genius or just coincidence. There were a lot of similarly named ESCOs that sent out flyers at the same time, trying to get people to convert to their name, convert to them instead. So there was a lot of questions that people had. Is this a scam? Is this real? So we addressed those. There were a lot of questions related to cost, and I'll come to that in the next slide. But people were worried about their costs increasing. There's multiple reasons for that, of course. A lot of us have been at home the last year a lot more than before, and our usage is higher. But people were wondering if the Westchester Power program had to do with their cost increases, and there was some responses that were required there. There was a small minority of people that were concerned about how Westchester Power opted them in. So there was some consternation about that, but very little patience to actually listen to the history of how deregulation in New York happens and what caused an opt-in mechanism to come in. The simpler answer that I think got a little traction was the town forcing within quotes everybody into the Westchester Power program gives everyone choice. You now have every resident can choose to stay with Westchester Power or move to Con Ed. And if the town board did not do that, then Westchester Power as an option doesn't exist to anybody in the town. So I think that response got a little bit more traction than the more detailed responses to the history of how this happened. And then there was like some interesting tidbits about someone that was a town of Newcastle resident, but with a Mount Kisco address getting opted into the standard power option that Mount Kisco picked versus the green power option that the town of Newcastle picked. But it ultimately turned out that was not because of his address. It just turned out that his name happened to match exactly somebody else's name on the system. So there was a bunch of communication that went on. Steve, the next slide, please.
Yep. I just want to say really quickly, I think the reason that you didn't hear a giant uproar from people who, really didn't quite understand it and were concerned is because of the team led by the tremendous work from Vivek. And when things go well, you don't necessarily, you see the calm duck on top of the water. You don't see all the paddling underneath. Well, that was Vivek, working really hard to keep everybody calm and provide the proper information to them.
Yeah, I particularly thought that the team has done and continues to do a great job on social media, and looking out for those conversations and trying to keep ahead of them and really deliver some very straightforward, clear explanations of things that really diffused, I think, a lot of drama.
The only reason there's there's more discussion now than there should be is actually this chart here, where when you see the blue bars are Con Ed pricing. It's the variable pricing that Con Ed provides compared to the red and the yellow bars are the Westchester Power pricing. You can see that in the first couple of years, our participation in Westchester Power has saved us money, but then towards 2019 and 2020, Con Ed's prices have been lower than the fixed prices that we were locked into. And if you actually crunch the numbers, the area under the curve to the right is just about the same as the area above the curve on the left. So all in all, we're probably breaking even if for the vast majority of us that have been in the Westchester Power program since 2016. But what's interesting is what's going on now. As you can see towards the end, I mean, it's still too early to call a trend here, but you can see Con Ed's pricing starting to raise. Simultaneously, we've managed to negotiate, or Westchester Power has negotiated a lower pricing under the latest contract. So the last couple of months, you have had the fixed prices with the Westchester Power being lower than the Con Ed pricing. But having said that, people are right to be worried about the utility prices, and I typically respond to that, and I'm telling this so that other people can as they get questions to questions about how do I save on my electricity bill. The two real good answers are A, if you've got the resources and the right roof, put solar panels on your roof. It not only takes care of your supply piece of your power, but because of net metering, it also takes care of the delivery charge that Con Edison charges. But then if you don't have those resources and you are looking to save money, switch from the Westchester Power green option to the standard option. You have the ability to opt down, and that'll save you another half a cent per kilowatt hour, which is sizable. So those are the two main recommendations I give people. But those people that choose to switch to Con Ed because they look at that big gap that's happened the last year, I ask them to make sure that they keep their eyes on their bill every month. So With that, the last slide. So these are just some numbers on what happened this last time. Every time there is a Westchester Power contract renewal, it's in the news. So a lot of people do end up opting out. So that second bullet, it shows us that there's 166 residents opted out. The vast majority switched to Con Ed. And these are the people that need to keep their eyes on their bill because they think they're getting a lower price, but that variable rate is going to might come in and bite them on the backside. The vast majority of our residents are still with Westchester Power, 4,251. That number was about 5,000 in 2016 when the Westchester Power program first started. So about 85% of everyone that was initially there are still there. I don't know how that correlates to the 6,000, 7,000 households that exist. I'm not sure who supplies power to the other 1,000 or so. But the other good news is that almost everybody, 98.8% of our kilowatt hours were from the green option. So that's all renewable power that's being supplied to the vast majority of these residents. There were a few that opted back in, and there's going to be more that opt in the first quarter of 2021. We don't have that data yet. The first quarter, January, February March was when new residents who came in after 2019 were opted into the program. They didn't have an option they could have called Westchester Power and opted in before, but they weren't automatically opted in before. But they were in March. So when the Q1 data comes up, that 4251 number will jump up as well. The bottom line is the big savings here. In 2011, we had a climate initiative goal of saving 60,000 tons of carbon per year, and this program alone saves about 30% of that in 2020. So this is a big. It's a low hanging fruit, and we all of your participation in that is something to be applauded. That's all I have. I promise to keep it short. I hope I did.
Questions? Great.
Well, I don't have any questions on this one because I feel like we've engaged on this topic a little bit recently, but I know that for folks who haven't been following along as closely as the town board has, this summary is really helpful. So thank you for taking the time to educate us on this piece of work, which I know is really critical to our kind of clean energy goals and so on. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, once again, thank you for all the support for getting these things done. Whatever we do, it just doesn't happen if we don't have your support. So we know that, and we definitely appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, we should also thank you for your support and your partnership because, the SAB continues to be just an outstanding model for what a volunteer board in this community can and should be. I mean, you guys go above and beyond in terms of your work on behalf of our community. So thank you all so much for everything that you're doing. It's tremendously reassuring that we have a group like yours who can take ideas and run with them and research them. So we really love getting to work with you guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Before we move on to the next agenda item, Jill, can we take a 2-minute break? I see
just a motion.
Nodding along vigorously. So
Yeah. Then we just need a motion to adjourn for 3 minutes.
I move to adjourn for 3 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll be back in 2 minutes for me.
2 minutes.
Thanks for doing that, Ivy.
These are the advantages of having a woman as town supervisor. Uh,
That was quick.
Okay, can we go ahead and get started again?
Sure. Nick, do we need a motion to go back in or we're good to go?
We need a motion to reconvene, yes.
I move to reconvene.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the draft local law to change Old Pines Bridge Road, which is the exit to the train station parking lot, from a one-way road to a two-way road. Do you want to, Jeremy, do you want to introduce this? Do you want to have Nick introduce the legislation?
Nick, you can go ahead.
Sure. So I'm just turning to it. In the board's packet is a local law proposed. That's on page 10 of the packet. That sets forth what the town board discussed at its work session, turning Old Pine Ridge Road from one way to two way. So as you see, if you like, let me put it up on the screen. So on the screen in front of you, in front of me, I guess, you'll see that we've crossed out in chapter 120, section 123-20, 123-21, that Old Pine Bridge Road West, which is restricted as being one way. It's now removing that restriction and instead making Old Pine Bridge Road south from a certain other distance as one way, recognizing that in the balance it reverts to two ways. And we've reviewed this with town staff, and I'm told that this implements what the board discussed at the last meeting. So that's what local law would require a public hearing, no referral to the county or the planning board, just a public hearing to receive public comment.
So I'm actually sort of interested in hearing from any of my fellow town board members as to whether you heard any additional feedback from anyone. I know we introduced this idea at the last meeting, encouraged folks to reach out to us if they had any comments or feedback. I actually did not hear from anyone during the week, but I don't know if anyone else did.
I did. I heard from actually a few people that they were worried about safety, given that a lot of people are using the back parking lot now for recreation more than anything else. But even, and they're not used to looking for two-way traffic or worrying about, cars coming both ways. And that also once it does resume for, significant car activity, that people aren't going to realize that there's been a change. So a lot of people were concerned about that. I think more so now with kids, the people who really talk to me are one was kids who are bike riding and, kind of playing back there now, that they're very concerned with two-way traffic.
So I've only heard positive things, but admittedly not that many. Only a couple people have spoken to me about it. In terms of the concern about safety, just like we have traffic calming devices and we put up those big signs the police put up, we certainly can train, if you will, people to understand the flow of traffic. very easily. And now is the time to do so when it's not used in any major capacity. And for anybody who opposed the parking in the front of town hall and didn't want a parking lot there, I would imagine all of them would support that same traffic in the back, because now you can access it from the backside coming down Washington. So, certainly I am a big proponent of this, and it can be done safely. It can be done with signs that are going to be there permanently, big signage that we use with those plugins for the police or solar, whatever they may be. And I think now's the time to give it a try. But certainly we'll move the ball forward one way or another.
Can we also, I think sometimes we have put cones around certain parts of that back lot when they're essentially empty and being used for fun. Maybe we can do that too, if they're not being used for parking.
I think it's rather sporadic with the bike riding. There's some people who go like after the half day, or then I'll see like Sunday's pretty busy. It's not anything that's like the farmer's market where every Saturday, that's from 8 to 1. So I think that might be a challenge, Lori.
I think people still have to keep in mind the fact that it's a parking lot.
Yeah, I'm just.
I know. I get so nervous over the idea that kids only are looking for one-way traffic when they're riding their bikes in the street instead of two-way.
Right.
They should be looking both ways. I don't know that people aren't going in the wrong way there anyway because there's so little traffic. That's a frightening thought to me. So yeah.
Is there any significant parking back there during the week now?
Not there.
Right. That's kind of why I'm saying we could probably just put cones along the drive.
Yeah, I've said before, I really share Lisa's concerns about safety, or the concerns that folks have articulated to you, Lisa, with regard to safety. I'm willing to give it a try and see how it goes. And I agree with you, Jeremy, that if we're going to give it a try, and we have talked about this for years, so if we're going to give it a try now, it does seem to be the right time to do it. We can pull it back, we can amend it, and so on. I guess if we decide to do this, right, Nick, the next step is that we would move this forward to a public hearing. So, we would be asking the community to come in and have the opportunity to speak to us before we put an end to this.
And I'm happy to speak to the chief about putting up some sort of delineators so that you're keeping traffic within the, those lanes of traffic as opposed to, going through the parking lanes. But I am cognizant of the fact that, you've got not one, but two entrances that lead you from the playground to the parking area, and you have to cross those ways. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we, let me speak to the chief, because maybe there's a way of us, permanently putting, not permanently, but putting the crosswalk, this sort of like triangles to just alert people that they're there. I'm laughing over the prospect of maybe putting the pedestrian beacons. It would only take us like 2 or 3 years to get Con Ed to help us with that. So, but maybe there's interim measures that we can do, painting the crosswalks and putting signs there to just alert people that they should be.
It would be great to take a look at, even before we change this, doing some of that communication with the community, because my impression, I go over there too. Alexander Skateboards there. I like to walk around there too, and it's already dangerous there. Even without the two-way, people are sort of nuts, and they drive through really fast, and and it makes you nervous. So, regardless of whether or not we go with the two-way, it might be a good idea to just have the chief put out some kind of community information.
Look, especially the weather's gorgeous and the kids are really enjoying that playground. Between that and the basketball court, that place is hopping back there. There's a ton of kids. It's great.
Right. Well, there's a ton of kids using the basketball court too, and some are parking in the back and walking.
Walking right through. Sure.
The other thing I think we need to be cognizant of, and I'm not convinced about this, but I'm willing to give it a shot. But in terms of the farmers market, we really need to make sure, at least initially, that we have a police presence there for traffic, because I'm just concerned with trucks coming in and out, with a lot of people coming in and out, and a significant number of pedestrians all in that area. And now we'll have two-way traffic. I just want to make sure that we keep everyone safe. So we may want someone there directing traffic, at least at the beginning of the summer, to make sure that they know this is two-way. There are going to be people making left turns here and people making right turns here. And so just to make sure we keep everyone safe.
And Jill, back to Ivy's point about people speeding. I mean, we've talked about this before where we put up the signs, but maybe if the chief could put one of those, you know, where it shows you your speed as you're driving along, like how they have it at Graveline. Because I think people just don't realize. And trust me, like I'm something when I'm driving a Graveline, I'm like, oh, I'm going way too fast. So it really is helpful. I like those ones.
Okay.
Jill, does the DPW build, for lack of a better term, the speed bumps? I mean, normally on certain roads,
Bumps are a problem with paving though, so we wouldn't want permanent speed bumps there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious whether we would or we wouldn't. I'm curious, do they do that?
We don't. Do we have speed? We don't have a speed bumps anywhere.
No, we don't.
I guess maybe the paving company could do it if they were doing it, but we don't.
Right, so the bottom line is we don't.
We don't do them.
DPW doesn't do that. All right.
So, I mean, I'm comfortable with advancing this to our, you know, setting a public hearing and moving this forward.
Okay.
Others agree? Yes, I'm seeing nodding. Okay, great.
So would we want to set it for the public hearing at the latter part of the meeting or a month from now? So for May, like May 11th? Does that give us enough time to get it out in the public and make sure everyone knows about it?
I think so. I mean, you know, we've been communicating about it a little bit, all of us, I think, on Facebook and in the newsletter and so on. So I think the word's starting to get out. That to me feels like sufficient time. Jeremy, what did you?
I was going to say, what's the worst case scenario? If we feel that there's not enough people involved or paying attention, we could always extend it.
Okay. All right.
Would,
So we'll put it.
would you be interested in initiating it sooner and then extending it, you know, for 2 weeks or something?
Well, it was just a matter of when we authorize a public hearing, we just need to set a date. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody felt that was sufficient time for us to circulate the idea and get it going.
Yeah, it's like a month.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the nice thing about this is that we have the luxury of time so that you actually will see it in action. You know, we'll have that learning curve with the public and we'll be able to accommodate it and make whatever changes we need to make sure it's safe. Okay, great.
So is the board thinking of doing a resolution setting the public hearing tonight? Or is
Yes.
that, okay.
Yes, so the latter part. So Nick, would we do that part of it? We wouldn't do that as a consent. We would do that just as a regular resolution, correct?
I would think so, as we're adding it tonight, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, perfect. Thank you, Christina. All right, Nick, do you want to talk about these next resolutions?
I will. So the next two resolutions concern the Chappaqua Crossing project. You may be familiar with the planning board's consideration of a residential project, the East Village, the planning board, and the town board's prior approval of the retail portion of our project. These two resolutions have nothing to do with those two. Nothing to do with retail, nothing to do with residential. Rather, this has to do with the master subdivision. So the planning board created and has approved a resolution authorizing the re-subdivision of a property into a variety of separate parcels, the East Village, the office campus, the retail, and also important to the town, the parcel for the Wallace Auditorium. And in order to file the subdivision plan, they needed to satisfy certain conditions. And before the East Village could be approved, this plat needs to be filed. So this is an important step in sort of the process for the Chappaqua Crossing project. And town staff and the applicant's representatives have been working very diligently to make sure those conditions have been satisfied and that all the conditions of the planning board imposed have been implemented, and that we're really laying a good foundation for the understanding of this property and its use and how it's being subdivided. Because it's important, because once the subdivision plat is filed, you have 5 or more separate parcels and there needs to be cross easements and a variety of other legal mechanisms to make sure that everyone has the right access and use over the properties. And it's been it's a complex project, and both the applicant's team and certainly I want to commend the town staff, Bob Cioli and others in the building and planning department have done a great job in making sure that everything has been implemented correctly and done correctly. So tonight you have before you 2 resolutions. The first is to accept a declaration of easements, covenants, and restrictions. And this really pertains to 4 items. So the declaration of easements, covenants, and restrictions imposes for perpetuity certain restrictions on the use of certain properties. And the first one aspect of this project, I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I share the right screen. That's it. So you should, no, did I not share the right screen? So give me a moment. Okay, you should be seeing on the screen the subdivision map, the resolution. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so the first aspect of the declaration is to memorialize the town board's request that the 4 lots along Roaring Brook Road be forever green and open space and not built upon. The town board had the option to either take title to them or rather have it a conservation easement imposed. Town board decided that it was best to have the conservation easement imposed and that the town not be the owner of this parcel. So these parcels through this declaration are being kept as forever green, subject to the walking trail that goes through the parcel. The next aspect of this declaration pertains to the walking trails. The project required a number of walking trails by the planning board, and on the page in front of you, you'll see there's a walking trail. So there's an easement that gives the public the right to access these walking trails, as well as to park in this area to access the walking trail, as well as the ability to, once they get off the walking trail, to walk back out of the property so that they have the ability to access the trails, use the trails, and park to the trail should they do so. Now, subject to reasonable rules and restrictions that are equal to how the residents of the property are restricted, such as maybe it's for dawn to dusk use only, maybe there's no rollerblading, things of that nature. So as long as the public is treated the same as the residents, then we're okay. And the planning board had very specific requirements as to where the trail will be located. Town staff has confirmed that that has been accurately memorialized and is reflective of the planning board's wishes. The third item is less exciting, has to do with stormwater drainage. There are certain easements regarding how drainage to be handled. So there are easements granted throughout the property as shown on one of these sketches in front of you, and likewise utilities, right? There are cross easements for the utility lines that go forth to serve the various properties. So that has been provided for in this declaration. So those are the 4 purposes of this declaration. The town board adopting a resolution tonight is authorizing this document to be recorded against the property, and it grants certain rights to the public and the town board and to enforce that. Our office has reviewed it as to form and substance, and the town engineer has reviewed it with respect to the very complicated meets and bounds descriptions that are attached to the properties. The second item, I'm sorry to say, is not as exciting as this past one. This is the irrevocable offer of dedication. It has to do, let me turn to this page. And so with respect to the Chappaqua Crossing project, there was certain road widening that occurred. We're all familiar with what occurred at Route 117 Roaring Brook Road, the state road expansion. There was minor improvements to Roaring Brook Road itself, where the road was widened. This is a town road. So there is an irrevocable offer of dedication, and in tonight's resolution, the town board is not only accepting the offer of dedication, but it's a two-step process. First, the developer offers it to you, and then the town has to adopt a resolution taking that offer and accepting the deed. So in tonight's resolution, because the town staff has already inspected the road and determined it's paved, and it's a very minor area, as you can see on the map, the town staff is recommending you accept the offer of dedication and the dedication itself. So tonight's resolution will effectuate those two steps, and then deeds will be recorded that transfers to the town the title to those properties. An administrative and less exciting step than walking trails, but still very necessary and important part of the project. So that's being done tonight with the subdivision. The acceptance of these two resolutions will allow the town engineer to advise the planning board chair that the resolutions have all been completed. The applicant has complied with all the conditions, including the payment of outstanding review fees. So it's ready for the planning board chairman to sign the plat, which will then be recorded. I hope that was thorough enough and there are no questions, but if there are, happy to answer them. All right. Very good. So it's on the consent agenda tonight for adoption of those two resolutions.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can just review the administrative items. We've got the adoption of minutes. We've got the adoption of the monthly reports for March. We've got the authorization to purchase an HVAC unit for town hall. This is down in the detectives unit. It's a $13,000 purchase. It's there because, again, anything over $10,000 is being put forth for the board for your information. The next is an authorization to accept mini bids for the purchase of town vehicles. We had budgeted $125,000 in the DPW budget for 3 replacement trucks. This mini bid is coming in for 2 Ford F-50s and a Mason dump at just under $121,000. Next is an authorization to amend the 2021 Partners in Safety Full Service Agreement. So Partners in Safety does our drug and alcohol testing, pre-employment physicals, accidents, random testing, and what we have added in the past as required by PESH and OSHA is audiology report or audiology tests for certain DPW workers, depending upon the type of job description they have. And we'd like to expand the Partners in Safety agreement to include that testing as well. And last but not least is the authorization to issue a refund, and this is for Birchwood Swim and Tennis. Sometimes when an organization or a homeowner takes and challenges their assessment, and the resolution comes in after the tax bills have already been printed, we end up issuing refunds instead of being able to just modify the tax roll before the tax bill is issued. In this particular case, there was a resolution, we reduced the appraisal, but it came after the taxes were, the tax bill was issued, so the taxes were paid, and a refund of $4,447.27 is due to Birchwood. And that concludes our work session agenda. Does anyone have any questions on the administrative items? Okay, then we're ready to move into our town board meeting. Only an hour over, darn, sorry about that.
So do we need a motion to close the work session and enter into our town board meeting?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the town board meeting for Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. As I have in the past, I will hold my supervisor's report and deliver it in the e-newsletter tomorrow. Lots of good information in there. I did just have one announcement that I wanted to make, which is to invite everyone to please join the town board for the Yom HaShoah Holocaust Remembrance Day, which we will be gathering virtually on Thursday, April 15th at 7 p.m. And there's going to be a keynote speaker, a Holocaust survivor, Paul Edelsberg. who will be addressing the community. We'll also be joined by our County Executive George Latimer, the Reverend Dr. Martha Jacobs, as well as the co-presidents of Enough, Sam Rosenberg and Charlie Gordon. So we really, this is it's a solemn occasion, but it's also a wonderful opportunity for us to come together as a community in remembrance. And we had a fabulous virtual celebration last year. I think it was the first kind of virtual community gathering via Zoom that we did last year, and it was really moving. And I know that this year's promises to be the same. So I strongly encourage everyone to join us on Thursday evening. You can find the information in the newsletter tomorrow on Facebook and on the town's website. You do need to register in advance for the event. So that's everything that I have. Jill, did you have anything for the administrator's report this evening?
I just wanted to comment, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the garden that's right next to the gazebo with the daffodils that have bloomed, it is stunning. More beautiful than they had described it in the pictures when they had planned it. It's really spectacular. You should just take a walk out there. Really, it restores your faith. And if you happen to wander through Millwood, I understand that the lights are up at the Millwood field. They're not energized yet, but they're actually erected. So our lighting project over at the Millwood field is moving along, and we're so excited. So stay tuned.
Did anyone else on the town board have any announcements that they wanted to make?
Did want to remind people that Newcastle Cleanup Day is quickly approaching, weekend after next, April 24th. The orange bags are available at Town Hall and at our local hardware stores if you're eager to get a jump on it in your own neighborhoods or really anywhere in town.
Thanks, Lori. Important reminder. Okay, so sorry, switching back and forth between my screens and I'm a little tired. So the next item I will come to the portion of the agenda that's dedicated to public comment and new business. So if we have anyone who's with us this evening who would like to make a comment, please feel free to raise your digital hand. And Thornton from NCCMC, who's our host this evening, can usher you into the conversation. And in the meantime, while our attendees here on the Zoom deliberate whether they'd like to say anything, Pam, I'll just check with you and see whether we have anybody on YouTube who's raised any questions.
I'm not seeing any comments on the YouTube feed, and right now no one has their hand raised of the attendees.
Thanks. And Christina, did anything come in for us over public?
No.
Great. Oh, now we have a hand raised.
Yes.
Pam, yeah.
Yeah, Holly McCall, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Holly.
Hi. I just wanted to say how impressed I was with the presentation by the Sustainability Advisory Board. I like to think that I'm pretty in touch with what's going on in town, and was really still taken aback by how much work that they're doing on a regular basis and the depth of the analysis. So just wanted to really compliment all of the town board and that committee for the work that they're doing, and a really informative presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Okay. Sorry, I'm flipping screens again. So we do have a consent agenda this evening. And so just before we consider that, I want to check in with my fellow council members just to determine whether anyone has anything that they would like to move off of the consent agenda for consideration. Now I have to flip screens again and go back and see if any of you are raising your hands or nodding. Okay. Lisa, I need to get that second screen. Okay.
You could ask us to just say no.
Speak up.
Yeah.
All right, so let's, can we go ahead and introduce our resolutions? Starting with the consent agenda.
Anyone else can start? I usually do, but To be a hog, anyone?
All right, Jeremy, if you've got it, go for it.
All right, then I guess I'll do it. Okay, the consent agenda items. All matters listed under consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. Should a council member wish an alternative action from the proposed recommendations, the council member shall request that this matter be removed to the appropriate section at this time, which we just did, and there was no request. Designation of town prosecutor to amend that prior resolution. Authorization to accept resignation with the police department, authorization to post a position with the police department, authorization to hire an independent contractor regarding the community center, authorization to hire seasonal laborers for our parks, adoption of minutes April 6th of this year, adoption of monthly reports for the month of March, authorization to accept the mini bids for purchases of town vehicles, authorization to amend the 2021 Partners in Safety Full Service Agreement, authorization to appoint Climate Smart Communities Task Force, authorizing acceptance of declaration of easements, covenants, and restrictions associated with the Chapel Crossing subdivision plat, authorizing acceptance of offer to dedication of minor right-of-way road improvements along Roaring Brook Road associated with the Chapel Crossing development.
Thank you.
And the authorization to issue the refund, do you see that, Jeremy? Do I have the wrong one?
I have it.
Oh, you know what I
too.
did? I pulled up, my apology. You know, as I just said that I looked up authorization to issue refund Birchwood Swim and Tennis.
Second.
Nick, can that go on the, Nick, can
Well,
should
it
we-
wasn't on the initial one, so we should do it. Is it?
So we
should do
No,
should
it is on the initial one, so no, we can, yes.
Okay, fine.
Yep, we can.
Sorry.
There's no objections been added.
Okay, I think Lauren seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $1,450,987.21 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail reports, all dated April 9th, 2021. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, April 14th of this glorious year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passing the baton, who's next?
All right, I move to authorize the purchase of a replacement HVAC unit within Town Hall Police Department Detectives Unit for the total estimated cost of $13,000 as per the proposal from Atlantic Westchester, 26 Adams Street, Bedford Hills, dated March 8th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the appointment of Kenneth M. Bernstein to the position of hearing officer for the purpose of a police disciplinary hearing at the hourly rate of $185 effective April 14, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I move to set a public hearing on a local law to turn train station traffic flow on Old Pines Bridge from one-way to two-way for May 11, 2021 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as practicable.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think that's it.
I think that's it.
That's it.
That was a
Move
consent
the bid you
agenda
all.
items. Whoever called that, just a great idea. Whoever came up with the consent agenda, I will buy you a bottle of wine.
Oh, yeah.
That was me.
This will, you'll all be looking back to my tenure on the town board. This is what I'll be remembered for. That form-based code.
All right, well, I hope we have a consent.
You'll be like, she brought us the consent agenda.
Eternally great.
As much as I'd love to say, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.